Okay, welcome everyone to the some that needs to be muted. So we're going to have some technical challenges during this meeting because the live streaming isn't available. The meeting will be recorded and will be put online. Can we just have a look at this before we start the meeting?
It might be that everybody online needs to mute.
So if they want to speak, turn it off on.
Okay, so this is going to be an interesting meeting from a technology point of view. So apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Stevenson. We also have Councillor Anjana Patel, who's joining us remotely. Direct declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare, first of all, of Cabinet? I think it's a non-pecuniary interest, but I should point out I have a EV car and rely on on-street charging, so I don't think it's a pecuniary thing, but I think it's worth noting. Any other? Stephen?
Thanks very much, Leader. Just in relation to the tall buildings item, just a non-pecuniary interest, as I work for the London Assembly and the GLA is mentioned.
Thank you. Any other members have any interest to declare? No? Okay. So petitions. First of all, any petitions from Cabinet members? Don't see any. From councillors, I believe Councillor Kulig has a petition to present.
Has been signed by 19 residents of Crown Street. Just to say, residents on Crown Street have contacted councillors with regards to speeding and have expressed they'd like to see the council consider additional traffic calming measures on the street. This is due to the number of vehicles speeding down the street, particularly late at night and in the early mornings, causing excess noise and nuisance, posing a danger to pedestrians and killing more than one cat. We're therefore requesting that the council consider traffic calming measures such as speed bumps, but happy for the council to take a lead on looking at what might work at appropriate intervals to slow vehicles and reduce the use of Crown Street as a through road.
Thank you very much. That will go to the Traffic and Road Safety Advisory Panel for consideration. Do any other councillors have any petitions to present? No. Okay. I believe we also have a petition from a member of the public, Mr. Chris Hill. If you could just wait a second, if you are online, for us to turn the sound on so we can hear you. But if you now start.
Thank you for inviting me to present this petition. So I'm a resident of Sydney Road, where I've been for 27 years. This, I'll read the text from the petition. So petition to Harrow Council. We, the undersigned, request Harrow Council to investigate solutions and then hold a consultation on the options for resolving the current parking problems around Victor Road, Sydney Road, Albert Road, Edward Road, Pinnerview, north of Headstone Gardens, Fairfield Drive, Downing Close and Atherton Place. This is a relatively recent problem following local developments and is causing a great deal of stress for the residents of the area. We have 180 signatures on this petition.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That petition will also go to the Traffic and Road Safety Advisory Panel for consideration. Okay, we don't have any more petitions, so we now move on to public questions. The first question is for Councillor Anjana Patel, and it's from, I think, Mr. Batt.
Did that work? Hi, good evening all. So my name's Deepak Bhatt. I live at 98 Drury Road, West Harrow. I've got a very nice garden, so if anyone wants to go by and have a look, they're welcome. And it partly brings me on to the point that what we've been suffering on Drury Road is a lot of people driving past and throwing litter, particularly McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's lots of food being deposited on the road, and as a consequence, I've got a lot of rats in my garden now. So my question was to the Cabinet, how many fines have you actually issued this year and how many have been paid?
Thank you. We just need to wait a second whilst we turn the sound on. So if you could turn the mic off and we'll turn the sound on for Anjana to answer.
Is it okay now for me to speak? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bao, for your question. The number of littering fixed penalty notice issued over the past 12 months has been 1,016. We have already received payments for 488, and a further 327 are also expected to be received.
Thank you for that. Can I ask a follow-up question? My
That's
direct
great.
follow-up.
Absolutely, you can, but I was just waiting for the sound to be turned off so we don't get the echo. So, like I said, yes, you can. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So my question fundamentally is I've got a list of all the incidents that have occurred on Drury Road with a time, date, number plate, and video footage of people throwing rubbish out their vehicles. Why is it that you are incapable, well, not you particularly, but the environmental team are incapable of actually issuing out an FPN to those people who are committing these offences? I mean, it's not difficult to actually issue out an FPN to the offenders and then come back to me, because I spend 2 hours of my time actually assembling each of these reports, which is really clear evidence. So you should, out of courtesy, at least acknowledge. The first point is acknowledge what I've sent. The second point I'd like to make is confirm that you've issued a fine. The third point is, has it been paid? If it's not, give me a reason why. And the fourth one is follow up properly. But there's no follow up with all the reports I'm submitting.
Thank you. I would just point out before we go to Councillor Patel, this is currently the subject of a complaint that you've made as part of the complaints procedure. So there will be limited things that we can say. And also it's very difficult to talk in the public meeting about specific cases. But Councillor Patel, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I totally agree with the leader, and there are processes that the council and the council officers has to follow. Residents can send us and whatever information you have sent us, I'm sure they would have reviewed it. And I think, as the leader said, I will not delve into more because you have made a complaint, and we will be looking at it when we respond to your complaint. Thank you very much.
Paul, just to finish that one off, Paul. The complaints procedure has come to an end. So stage 2 was completed 2 weeks ago. The response I got was unsatisfactory. So I mean, the next stage is the ombudsman. So
so councillors don't get directly involved as part of the council complaints procedure. I'm happy to review it, but ultimately the next step is to go to the ombudsman. But I'm happy to take a look at it. But I'm just conscious that I don't want to intervene in a process that's set up to be politically neutral. So I will look at it for you. Okay, we now have a public question for Councillor Marilyn Ashton from Samantha Pally. Are you joining us remotely? Oh, you're here, Samantha.
Okay, so my question was, can you please outline the reason why Harrow Tesco site in Hines Road is exempted from the tall buildings guidance?
Yes, so thank you very much. It's a very good question. And as everybody knows, I'm very keen on talking about these things. This is actually, I mean, obviously the officers are very helpful and have written me a reply, but I think in this case, it might be easier to answer it in my own words. You see, we have got adopted policy, which it's quite hierarchical. So, for example, the core strategy and the area action plan were adopted in 2012-13 respectively. And they are the policies that we have to use. It's not that it's not a political answer, but it's not that we agree with the policies necessarily. And that when we are now writing our new local plan, which will supersede them, which will replace them, it will be different because we have a different way of looking at things. But in the adopted policy, as opposed to a supplemental planning document, which can only supplement adopted policy, it's very, very clear that the area action plan sets out an opportunity area, and the boundaries of that opportunity area are set, and we can't change them at the moment until, as I say, we adopt our new local plan. Why is this important? Because we can't adopt or put in a supplementary planning document that would contradict adopted policy. It can only supplement it. So if we put our tall buildings SPD in the opportunity area, it would actually be counter to what the area action plan and the core strategy actually says about the opportunity area. And what it says is that buildings can be 30 metres high. It says that we ought to be building much higher density development in the opportunity area. Now, although it's a more general answer, the Tesco site is in the opportunity area. Whether it should or shouldn't be isn't really the point. It's in it. So we can't make that tall building supplementary planning document apply because it would contradict what adopted policy says. And actually what we are doing, which will help, is we're writing a master plan, a supplementary planning document master plan for the opportunity area. And that, of course, will supplement adopted policy. And we are obviously going to set out what we'd like, to see a bit more. There'll be more detail about that area. Not all of it, but most of it will be included in this master plan. Having said that, and just to finish off, if you're concerned about Tesco, and I can assure you it's not exempt, it just can't be part of it because the line where the boundary is includes the Tesco site. I can tell you that, and we don't have a planning application, but with any application that's on the boundary of the suburban areas where the tall buildings SPD does have some bearing, a lot of bearing, because our policies are silent on the suburbs, so we can supplement it. I can assure you that we are very clear that with all development, if the roads let to a development that's in the opportunity area are 2 stories high, obviously it wouldn't be good practice to put a very, very tall building right opposite them. But that is just general planning policy. And I don't know what sort of planning application is going to come in. It may be better than it is, it may not, I don't know. We've only ever had a pre-application consultation at the moment. But I hope that explains it, and I hope I haven't sort of bamboozled everybody with a load of planning speak, but I think it's clear enough. We just can't do that because of adopted policy that has yet to be rewritten and adopted.
Each have a supplementary question. Can you just turn the mic on?
In the planning process, there is an inbuilt bias where an applicant is spoken to many times by the planning team. The objector is allowed 3 minutes to speak, even if they've lived in their property for 40 years, and can be completely ignored by planning officers, including their rights under the Equalities Act. There should be more honesty too about declaring interests at the beginning of the planning committee meetings, and they should not reach decisions because appeals against rejected applications cost the council too much. Does the council realise that in reality its planning process is heavily biased in favour of the applicant and at the risk of breaching the Equalities Act 2010? Is that process putting residents first or the council?
Ashton.
Don't know what that's got to do with the tall buildings SPD.
It's the planning process in general, if any applicant neighbour wishes to object.
I don't think I can answer that, only not because I don't want to. I'm happy to take it offline, or maybe at another meeting you could come and ask the same question, but I don't think that's a supplementary to the substantive one, and I don't really think I can answer it. I'm so sorry.
But also just add that the planning process isn't just something we do in Harrow. It's set by national legislation and also a framework. We can't deal with things in a different way. But we're happy to take on, if you want to write to me or to Councillor Ashton of any specifics, we can look into it.
Yeah.
However, the pre-application advice is a standard thing across the country. It's not done differently, and I don't think it means that residents don't get a fair share of the hearing. It just stops inappropriate things earlier on in the process. I don't know if you want to add anything or we move on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think obviously this is quite personal to you, but what I can
It's general, it's a general policy.
no, it's actually quite personal to you, and I do know that. But out of interest, we do have the ability, both myself as chairman of the planning committee, which is a highly regulated quasi-judicial body, and Councillor Nitin Parrott, we do have the ability to call in items for review. But in calling them in, it doesn't make it that it's not going to be granted. You know, we have to judge each application on its own merits. Whether or not it disadvantages the objector, I don't know. I've never really given it a lot of thought. But my take on it is that I don't think Harrow is particularly unusual in the way, because it conducts its planning committees, and in fact, I think it's a pretty good example of it. And I don't actually agree that it disadvantages the objector. I just think that we have to judge planning applications on their own merits and in accordance with planning policy. But I understand why you've asked the question.
Okay, the next question is also to Councillor Ashton. It's Irene, is it Russicki? Is she remote or is she in the room?
Hi, I'm remote. Hi, I'm remote. It's Irene Rusike. Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Irene Rusike. My question is related to London Plan policy D9 on tall buildings. So that policy part B says boroughs should determine if there are locations where tall buildings may be an appropriate form of development, subject to meeting the other requirements of the plan. The process should include engagement with neighbouring boroughs that may be affected by tall building developments in identified areas. Any such locations and appropriate tall building heights should be identified on maps in development plans. Tall buildings should only be developed in locations that are identified as suitable in development plans. So I want to know where we can find the maps that identified where the tall buildings are suitable.
I don't want to answer the question the same way as I answered the last question, but actually it's a pretty similar answer, because the area action plan sets out the boundaries of our opportunity area or intensification zone. And that is where the core strategy and the area action plan, it's not something we adopted, it's over 10 years old. So it's really quite, that's why we're writing a new local plan, because it's not what we want. It's not our vision for the borough as an administration. But we are at where we are at the moment with adopted policy, and where tall buildings can be legitimately, and the measurement in the core strategy is 30 metres, which is roughly 10 stories, sort of on average, is in the opportunity area. And the opportunity area is primarily in the town centre of Harrow. The rest of the borough, we are adopting, hopefully tonight, hopefully we'll give the green light to adopt. We haven't got to the agenda item yet. A tall building supplementary planning document, which will apply to the suburbs only, for the reasons I said before in the last answer, that we can't make it apply to the town centre. But it's not, I wouldn't say it was a map. I'd just say it's, the policy that was adopted under the previous administration does make it that in certain parts of Harrow, that is the town centre, in the opportunity area, buildings can be a lot higher, but there is no map
Thank you. Can you ask a supplementary?
Yeah, I have a supplementary question. I have read the Harrow and Wilston Area Action Plan, and it has and I don't believe it has a one size fits all for the opportunity areas, because the opportunity area is divided into sub areas. And I believe from my reading from AAP 6 on heights that there are different heights for the different sub areas. Is that not correct?
Yes.
So you will be looking at
Wait, hold on.
AA.
Okay. We don't move on.
I can't hear you.
So
Keep
we've had the
breaking.
supplementary, but I'm sure Councillor Ashton is more than happy to talk at length about detailed planning policy.
Oh, I could
things.
talk all night, Leader.
So-
I bore you stiff because it's not your subject. But having said that, the answer is yes, and maybe that's a bit short, but they're just. You're right. The area action plan is quite detailed and it does set out different heights. But the point is that the policy D9 is a relatively recent policy. It was adopted in 2021, and it is about tall buildings. But our policies that we have to work off, because they're adopted policies and can't be superseded, not even by a supplementary planning document, those policies were adopted in 2012 and 13. And that they are as they are. And the reason why we're writing a supplementary planning document, a master plan for primarily the opportunity area, is because of the lack of detail. We're going to be supplementing it. But you're right, yes, it does make some differences, but primarily the more intensive development is allowable according to this document within the opportunity area as set out. But there's no map.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to councillor questions. The first question is from Councillor Henson to Councillor Patel. Councillor Henson.
You can't hear very clearly at the back. That's why people are sort of straining a bit. And so the question is the portfolio holder satisfied that the installation of council-owned CCTV at flight tipping hotspots across the borough is being managed both timely and cost effectively?
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanson, for your question. The first priority location has been identified. 10 new 4G cameras have been purchased, and these are being built for installation week commencing 31st of July 2023. Power connection for these cameras are with the street lighting team for completion week ending 28th of July 2023. This is a clear ambition for the council as part of the flagship action under the corporate plan.
Councillor Henson, do you want to ask a supplementary?
Did you say 10 or 15 she bought?
10.
10. So the council purchased 15 CCTV cameras in 2021 to be used in hotspot areas to deter fly tipping. So this would be another additional 10 you're bringing in to deter fly tipping. But since late last year, we've been attempting to get just two cameras relocated within Roxburgh Ward, one outside the Ecology Park and one near the former Polyclinic in Alexandra Avenue. The site in Alexandra Avenue is quite concerning because part of the land is within the HRA and the leaseholders are being billed through their service charges to remove fly tips and they're not being investigated. Following a restructure, we're now being told it costs £1,200 and with a suggestion it comes out of NSIL to move a camera. And following the Home Office Surveillance Commissioner's guidance on installation of public space CCTV, they can only be sited for up to around 3 months for the permitted purposes. So what are your plans to ensure that the siting of CCTV is more timely, effective, and also cost effective, that's affordable to the wards, and make sure they make that difference that residents are demanding?
Thank you very much for your supplementary question. I'm not aware of purchasing 10 cameras in 2021, because as far as I'm concerned, many of these cameras which were installed before we took charge, either recording devices or the cameras which were not directly linked to the CCTV room. So, and then obviously the recording had to be removed and then looked at. So as far as I'm concerned, whatever happened before we took charge in 2022, it wasn't effective at all. So I'm kind of surprised that you asked this question. Not only that, as far as the fly tipping is concerned, the problem was there before as well, and obviously the cameras were installed for this reason, but it wasn't implemented effectively. What we are doing is we have actually identified the areas where the most fly tipping is happening, and then the location has been decided. Now, if you have a problem in your ward, and if you want to have an extra CCTV camera, then yes, it is going to cost money. And if you've got NSIL money, it is obviously useful for your residents to use it in that manner. And yes, moving cameras does cost, because then it has to be moved from one location to the other location, and it costs money. So there will be a charge for that. But as far as I'm concerned, this program is on time. It is taking a little bit longer. All the CCTV cameras are actually controlled have got a control in the CCTV room. So whatever we are doing is more effective, and we will be able to actually catch the people who are actually doing the fly tipping.
Thank you. I caught most of that. Misrepresentation of fact there, because the 15 orders comply with data access through the CCTV control room.
It's not a debate, it's a question, and you've answered it.
Thank
We next
you.
have a question from Councillor Assad.
Increase in knife-related attacks in the borough, from St George's Shopping Centre to parks and high streets. Apart from saying Harrow is one of the safest places to live in London, what is the portfolio holder doing to work with local partners to tackle knife crime in the borough?
Thank you, Councillor Assad, for your question. I can confirm that the council, alongside the police, are working very robustly to deal with knife crime and protect residents from becoming victims, but also raising awareness with our partners. It is firstly worth noting that knife crime is not unique to Harrow and affects every borough across London. However, I would like to highlight that knife offences in Harrow are some of the lowest in London, and with metropolitan policing, any knife-related issues or incidents therefore had a dramatic spike effect, and does not always portray an accurate picture of the extent of the issue. You may also be aware that the new Met for London launched in Harrow last night, which the leader attended alongside the Deputy Assistant Commissioner. Knife crime is a key priority within it. So we have been working with Superintendent to ensure this is localized for Harrow residents. There has been consistent police presence in the town centre, and since June 2022, with our support, we have focused on key operations in keeping residents safe. This is a part of our approach as a partnership through the community safety strategy. These operations have focused on robbery, antisocial behavior, knife crime, and violence. We have seen consistent reduction of around 20 to 30% when the police run operations such as this around violence, of which knife crime fits into. Since June 2022, police team have initiated many operations within Harrow, in addition to a multitude of corporate Met Police-wide operation to target violence and systematically target offenders that use violence, including knives, within their crime profile. The council continues to work jointly with police on a number of these operations. We have worked with the police to have a more consistent approach and have a visible policing present with street duties allocated daily assist in complementing a focus on the bus station, shopping centres, and engagement opportunity with local people coming in and out of Harrow. Moving forward, we have established new relationship with the British Transport Police and Safer Transport teams. We coordinate crime operations, pulling together the challenges of crime, including knife crime, from the train and bus station. Moreover, involving BTP will allow us to have a presence on the tube and train lines, ensuring an individual coming from outside of Harrow can be intercepted at a key transport hubs. We also work hard with our schools policing teams to ensure diligence around our younger communities, keeping on top of any intelligence, as well as identifying offenders who might be carrying weapons within Harrow Borough. We also have a great working relationship with businesses in the town centre to ensure that we are supporting them. During the summer months, we do see a spike in crime across the mat during the summer months with specific crime types. Warmer and lighter weather sees an increase in young people going into areas like shopping centre. Knife carriers tend to be younger elements, and that's why town centre operations are key to addressing that with us in the partnership. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Patel, for that very thorough answer. Thank you also for mentioning the community safety strategy. I believe that knife crime is not a main priority. It's on the list at number 9. And from my understanding, the administration hasn't put any extra money towards it. Having read the strategy, and you mentioning it, the reason why I'm raising this issue is because in the report it states that the Harrow Safer Spaces Survey 2022, 79% of residents said that knife crime was a problem in their area, and it also outlines some of the action the council will take. For example, having targeted days of action in local hotspot areas to reassure residents on knife crime specifically. I haven't seen any days of action in the areas that there have been stabbings. Can you confirm where in the last 4 months there have been days of action that focus on reassuring residents about knife crime in the borough?
Thank you for that. Whether the priority is number 9 or number 1, it doesn't really matter. All of those are our priorities as far as the knife crime is concerned. So we take all our crime seriously. And as far as the days of actions are concerned, we have done a week of action in Edgware. But obviously, when you say within the last 4 months, we are working very hard, and we have put quite a lot of days of action and days of weeks in place. But this is something that we have to do with in partnership with the police. So the communication is ongoing, and we are talking and making sure where the next day of action has to take place. But it is the week of actions that we have put down in our flagship action. We've already done one in Edgware, and it has been a very successful week of action. And the next one we will be planning in few months' time. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I discussed this with both the Borough Command, Basic Command Unit Chief Superintendent, and also the Superintendent and Inspector at the launch last night. It is an area where joint working is really important, and we need to make sure we step that up. One of the advantages of the new Metropolitan Police plan is that there's much more focus on borough-based teams. The Basic Command Unit took that away, and we lost a key link. They're now reintroducing across London a superintendent in each borough, and I think that's going to make a real difference to have that point person that we can go to and raise issues, and also can coordinate with us what they're doing, and also hopefully see less resources being pulled away to the other bits of the BCU. So we have a question from who we got it, Councillor Callum.
Hello. This should be a nice question for you, Councillor Stevenson. So from Pinner to Harrow Weald, flower baskets are being added to high streets across Harrow. I think many will agree this is a nice addition for many residents across the borough. Why, though, has South Harrow High Street not been considered for hanging baskets? And why are my residents being treated differently to other areas of the borough?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Kalu, for your question. It's a good question because it gives us an opportunity to show the transparency that we go through in the democratic decisions that we make. So there are 10 district centres that have been identified, that were identified at the time to have hanging baskets put up. The criteria chosen included the following, which are key. The first one was those with high vacancy rates, shop vacancy rates, that is. Those that had not had any prior investment through the Harrow High Street Fund, and borough boundary considerations. In relation to South Harrow, which you're asking about, I can just explain, and you probably are aware of this, but South Harrow has had a fair amount of investment from the Harrow High Street Fund, and the last audit of shop frontages found no vacant frontages in South Harrow. Now, the investment for South Harrow has totalled £312,000, and this was allocated from the Harrow High Street Fund, and the funding was used for the following. There was 45,000 for festive lights plus structural testing, 142,000 for 3 Copenhagen crossings, 35,000 for 14 benches, 50,000 for 8 trees, and £40,000 for a mural. So that totals £312,000 spent on South Harrow. Now, ward councillors have been advised that if they wish to apply for NSIL funds for hanging baskets, because we couldn't cover everywhere, they can do so. And Roxeth, for example, has got £108,033 and 34 pence as of April this year. So, there is something that can be done there, perhaps. You mentioned Pinner to Harrow Weald. Well, you could go from Wealdstone to Queensbury, where they've been put up as well. And in Wealdstone, I think that's the area that's had more hanging baskets than any other, because it's one of the highest places with shop vacancies. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you for the detail. Councillor Stevenson, can I go into my, So you suggest the decision was based on vacancy rates. It feels strange as there's now 2 Fresh Bank branches now closed in South Harrow. In addition, there is 1 other vacant. I would think in comparison to other high streets, that should be taken into consideration. You also raise a number of funds from the past decade in terms of spend to South Harrow. So South Harrow is one of the most developed areas in the borough. And as a result, we have a big NSIL budget, of which a lot is going towards new infrastructure in the coming month. So we put in applications for basketball infrastructure, for alley gates, for tree planting, even for braille on the old Copenhagen crossings. I don't think residents should have to compromise on these basic infrastructure improvements because they are not considered in a variety of high streets, among a variety of high streets across the borough. So I ask again, is there room for capital spend, as I've been informed the other high streets have had spent on them, for hanging baskets in South Harrow? We have a number of funds that we'll be using for a variety of things across South Harrow, but if this is being attributed fairly across the borough, I'm talking about flower baskets, why can South Harrow not be taken into consideration? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that further question. First of all, we've just got to think on the planning side. It's not what the situation is right now, for example, in an area, district centre. It's when we were making those decisions, of course, and that was done last year. You have to base it on the statistics that were available at the time, and that is available. It's very interesting what you say, and I think it's wonderful what is being planned by perhaps you and your fellow ward councillors in South Harrow, which will be great. I have been advised that there has actually been an application for NSIL funding by councillors for plants to be put up in South Harrow, but we'll just have to see how that goes, because they basically it's being looked into, because the planters do have to be maintained, but there is a SIL application, an in-SIL application. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, just to add, I mean, it's worth noting that Pinner in previous years got nothing from the High Street Fund. I don't think Hatch End got anything. But if you look at the vacancy rate in Pinner, it's actually amongst, when we looked at this, was amongst the highest in the borough at 6.32% of vacancy. I think Harrow Weald was also mentioned, and that's 5.93. In comparison, South Harrow has at the moment, when this was done, which was last month, 0. So, you have to try and prioritize when it comes to these things. Clearly, if the situation changes, we will review where these things go. I'd also just say maybe having a mural at £40,000 wasn't the best use of money, but that's a choice that Labour made when they were in charge. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions, so we can now move on to the key decision schedule. Is that noted?
Noted.
Okay, progress on scrutiny projects. Can Cabinet note the report? Is that noted? Okay, procurement of arboricultural services. Councillor Patel.
Thank you very much, Leader. This report requests authority from Cabinet to commence a procurement exercise for the provision of the Council's borough arboricultural services. Harrow has a statutory duty to maintain the borough tree stock and is responsible for 3,000 trees on Council's own land. For example, public highways, parks, allotments, cemeteries, woodlands, open spaces, and some school. We obviously had a contract which is expiring, and there is no suitable contractors we have found on the framework. So therefore, an open tender procurement exercise is recommended to meet our specific requirements and allow for a detailed evaluation to provide best practice. So for the new contract, the purpose for the new contract will cover the existing scope and will aim to further improve contractor performance with a new set of KPIs and a greater use of available technology, including digital photographic records. The proposed initial term will be 3 years with rolling 2 years extension option up to the maximum 10 months period. This will encourage best value and maximize procurement cost. So the recommendations are there that we have requested in 1, 2, and 3. If you could agree with it, please. And obviously, this is to ensure that the council fulfills its statutory responsibility to maintain its agricultural assets. So, if you would please approve this.
Thank you very much. I'd also just ask that confidential appendixes 1 to 4 are noted here. If anyone does have any comments or questions on those appendixes, we'll have to go into part 2. Don't let that necessarily deter you, but there is a cost of doing that. So I saw Councillor Perry's hand up.
Yes, only a couple of questions, please, Leader. The first one's just financial related, the 200k from the revenue budget. Obviously, there's more investment which comes through the highways, etc. Section 106. That 200k in your budget, does that represent an increase, a decrease, or a rollover of last year's budget of your contribution?
That will be the rollover budget of our last years, the 200,000.
And my second question is just with regard to the options, please. Earlier in the year, we saw an options paper come to Cabinet about potentially bringing in the filling in of potholes in-house. You kind of made a big issue of that. Why have we excluded option 1 about potentially bringing in this service in-house, and what work did we do to exclude that from the options from a financial feasibility perspective, please?
That is something which wasn't feasible, and that is why it's not included to bring it in-house. And as you see, it is a very large area that we have to cover. and it is not cost effective to bring it in while we can actually we can contract this out to the experts.
The only other point I would make briefly, and it is my final point, is we see later on in the report, by way of procurement options, there are dynamic purchasing systems out there and procurement options on this service, and we don't necessarily would need to run a detailed, robust, expensive procurement because there is these opportunities out there, but we're going again with an open process. So I just wanted to know what, in your introduction, you mentioned that there's no feasibility frameworks out there to commission such work. Whereabouts did you look?
I'm sure the officers have actually looked at whatever is possible and wherever it is possible, and that is why they have come back asking for this. I'm not an expert on this, but the officers are, who are actually running this service for us for many years.
I don't know if Dipti, you want to come in on that?
Yeah.
So in terms of the detail, I mean, I can come back with more detailed background information as to who we explored and share that more detail with you. But I think that it is quite a specialist area of work, and therefore we do need to procure that. And we just couldn't find that through the framework process.
I mean, I think the report kind of sets out that they were geared towards more estate-based and things that aren't quite what we need, but that was the advice we got from officers. Okay, so we have 4 recommendations set out on page 14, obviously noting the appendixes. Is that agreed? Okay, we now move on to the procurement of estate improvements and roofing renewals. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks Cabinet's approval for procurement for the following estate improved programme. As part of the stock condition survey, we've identified 6 estate improvements across 23 and 24 and year 24 and 25. The improvements will cost approximately 6.23 million, and this will be funded from our HRA capital resources for the next 2 years. There will be procurement of contractors for the 6 estate improvements. There are 6 separate tenders, which I'm glad, which will encourage SMEs and specialist contractors for us to achieve the best value and time. We're also looking at improving our emergency lighting upgrade, and this will be done across various blocks which have been identified in the capital program across the borough, which will be carried out in the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Right. Okay, so I presume there's lots of appendixes to this, so can we note them and can we agree the recommendations set out on page 21? There are 4 of them. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, we now move on to electric vehicle charging in Harrow. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, this report again sets out the recommendation. The recommendation is to increase the value of the contract with DSSL by £1 million over the 10 years life of the contract to prevent the value being reached early. This proposal does not commit the council to any additional capital spend, but provides sufficient aggregated contract value. Cabinet approved capital funding for the project in 2018. After which we engaged consultation to put together a tender specification, which was published in 2021 and included a non-guaranteed capital funding allowance was £20,000 per annum. However, this was omitted in the Gateway 2 report when the contract was awarded to DSSL in 2022. Given the level of interest and inquiries already received for additional cameras and CCTV related equipment from across other areas of the council, it is felt that the £20,000 per annum would not be sufficient, and therefore the report seeks approval to take this opportunity to increase the non-guarantee amount of £100,000 per annum. The aggregated contract value published in the tender.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? We're on the electric vehicle charging report, which is item 10.
Yeah, so sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. So these are the recommendation that we are asking. Sorry, this report sets out an update on electric vehicle charging provision in Harrow, including rapid charging provision, and seeks the authority from Cabinet to implement phase 2 and 3 of the Council's on-street residential charge point scheme by procuring lamp column charges point under the Oxford City Council Dynamic Purchasing System (DPS) for the supply of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure and associated services. So we recommend that you approve item 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to enable the expansion of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure on public asset for the benefit of Harrow residents while contributing to decarbonization of transport in Harrow. Cabinet authorization is required to comply with the Council's contract procured rule and financial regulations. We are obviously going to be putting residential to about 225 EV charging on our residential streets, and for that reason, we need this to be approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this report?
Yeah, which of the numerous reports introduced shall I ask questions on, Leader?
Suspect you should do the one that was on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll stick with EV. Okay. The first question, I'm trying to find it on my iPad here, but I've got page section 2.8 on there, and my question is with regards to how residents can influence where these 225 charge points go. Oh, I think it said in the report, and I'm just from memory saying residents can make requests on the website. Is that right, or is there going to
Yes,
be?
it is.
Obviously, this is a positive thing. I mean, how do we sort of disseminate that information more broadly?
They can and do.
They can.
I know because I've made a request on the website, and mine will be considered alongside everyone else in an objective way. But yeah, I believe we have a number of applications, and the team will then look at those applications and see where there's a cluster and put the appropriate charging provision in alongside that. But there is massively more than probably 230 that's been requested. It's something that I get a lot of emails from residents across Pinner and the borough.
Thank you for that information, Leader. And I see you've got a new parking space in the car park. Is that where your request went for a charging point for your dedicated car park space outside?
It doesn't have a charging point, and I don't charge in this facility.
Okay, fine. So how are we, clearly when you look at the report, and again I'm doing it by memory, there was a hell of a lot of people in Harrow with these electric cars, etc. So what's the process going to be? And I think I've read 1,500 somewhere. Again, it's from memory. That's only going to increase. How are we going to decide where these charging points go? What will be the criteria? Is it going to be clustered? The reason why I ask is because we've had complaints raised from residents who live in sort of flats and areas where they might not necessarily have EV charging points, and there's still quite a few out in the borough. I think as of a few weeks ago when the resident last contacted us, there was 7 or 8 out in the borough. So how are we going to decide so people can be confident that it's a robust process?
I mean, I'm comfortable for officers to share with you the process. It's the process we've historically had. I don't know changes have been made to it. If it needs updating, we can look at updating that, and that would come to Cabinet for approval. I mean, it's just worth noting that Harrow is the 3rd worst borough in London for provision of EV charging points, and is joint last when it comes to rapid recharging points. I think this is a flagship action for us. It is something that we want to double the number, and this more than doubles. I think it goes to 5 or 6 times, quintuples the number of charging points we have in the borough. But it still won't be enough, and we will be looking at other funding sources to try and increase the number. But it is what it is at the moment, and it's a welcome step forward, I think. It's interesting that the ULEZ judgment is going to come out tomorrow, and one of the things I've been trying to do in this borough is to make the alternatives more attractive rather than penalising those people who can't afford to replace their car. Is there any other questions you have?
Can I just come in?
It's just a very quick one, just on the practicalities, Leader, is with regard to controlled parking zones, clearly if there's people that live in a controlled parking zone and they ask for a drop curb, there's implications and they can't, there's consultations, etc. So what implications do, as we roll out en masse or in more EV charging points in CPZs with residential columns, is there legal issues towards that or not? I'm just from a practical perspective.
Not sure. I don't know if Councillor Patel or Dipti wants to answer that.
I would say Dipti will be
I
able
can
to
pick up.
answer,
We
because
are
when
going to
we
bring back an EV charging strategy as well that will help to supplement that. I mean, as the council and the leader has said, it is a small number of EV charging points in terms of the size of the borough, so we need to prioritise how they're allocated. It's likely to be areas where we've had requests for that, roads that have got no driveways, near flatted developments, and so there'll be a programme of that. But we will be bringing, as part of our transport strategy, also an EV strategy that will complement and supplement that information.
I mean, I think it's a very reasonable point, and is something that we need to look at as we move forward with these things.
Sorry,
because
Leader,
clearly
can I
you
just
don't
come
want to
in?
put things in a place where they can't be used because other people are parking, but equally you're wary of taking parking spaces away from people who are in a CPZ. So I think CPZs will be a challenge with this, but we can look at how other boroughs have done it and try and learn from them, especially because we're so far behind. We can look at the boroughs that are further ahead of us on that journey and see what's worked and what hasn't. But we'll come back to this in more detailed paper as part of the strategy.
Can I just come back,
being
Leader?
helpful, Leader, my response to Councillor Patel earlier with regards to procurement strategy, this was the actual report I was referring to with regards to we're going to be going through the Oxford DPS framework. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that there's more sort of public realm maintenance companies in the market than there is installation of electric charging point companies. And so if there's a DPS for this, where we can just immediately draw down an OSU compliant procurement, there might be one for, I'm just trying to save time and cost with regards to procurement and time. So that was where my question on the first report come from, just for helpful and clarity.
Thank you. I'm very happy that our procurement officer looks at that and gets back to you with more detail. And if there is a better way of doing it, we're very happy to look at how we can do that better and cheaper. Okay, so we have 5 recommendations set out on page 52. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, we now move on to the UK SPF Supply Ready West London Skills and Employment paper. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, a bit of a mouthful, but in simple terms, this is funding from central government through the GLA under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for 2 particular streams. One is for the supply ready to support local businesses, and the Skills and Employment Programme. Basically, the council, the London Borough of Harrow, has linked with Ealing, who've led on this and applied for grant funding, which has been agreed. And the London Borough of Ealing will coordinate this, and Harrow will be able to access support for the Supply Ready programme, which will assist them to secure public sector to help businesses secure public sector contracts. And in addition, the GLA has allocated the people and skills allocation of London's allocation of the UK SPC to sub-regional partnerships. And again, it's the London Borough of Ealing that's coordinated this, and Harrow has worked with them to secure a direct allocation of the people and skills funding. So these projects, of course, very much support our corporate policies of putting a council that puts residents first, but a place where those in need are supported, which is what this is all about. So basically, the option that we are considering and would like to do is to enter into grant funding agreements with the London Borough of Ealing for the Supply Ready and Skills and Employment Programme, and that will enable the London Borough of Harrow to secure £151,500 to support businesses to secure public sector contracts. The Skills and Employment Programme will enable the London Borough of Harrow to secure £474,115 to deliver projects to improve resident skills and access to job brokerage and supporting local businesses. All of this links into the economic strategy, which was agreed at last month's Cabinet. And on table 1 of the report, it just indicates how these activities that will be delivered with this funding. As far as the in particular, as far as the training, the skills and employment area is concerned, it's Excite and Learn Harrow that will actually carry out the work and use that funding. So the recommendation is that we go ahead on this basis and receive this money to help those in need and local businesses in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this report?
Just by way of comment, obviously, this is obviously something which we would support, and we always talk about trying to attract grant funding working regionally with other councils we've seen, and the organisations involved will do some good work. So it's a positive result. So well done.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. So we have
the officers have done a great
4
job.
recommendations set out on page 66. Are those agreed? Okay, we now move on to another key thing for us, the tall buildings supplementary planning document. Councillor Marilyn Ashton.
Oh, well, Leader, I have to say, I have really, other people maybe not, but I've really been looking forward to this. It was something that we put into our manifesto. It is something that we know that people want and frankly that we need. And interestingly, the questions that we had before actually are kind of a segue into this report in a sense, because we do have, frankly, a deafening silence on detail in our adopted policies, in our existing local plan, on whether or not, you know, our suburban areas can actually take in terms of their wonderful suburban character, the leafy roads of John Betjeman, Metro land, semi-detached houses, the reason why people like to come and live in Harrow for these suburban areas is so very important to everybody, and which is why we're looking at adopting local areas of special character in addition to this supplementary planning document. So this is, in my view, vital, and it should have happened, frankly, a long time ago, but didn't. And the first thing that we did when we took control of the council last year is to embark on. We thought it would take, but nonetheless, it's only just over a year since we took control of the council. Some of the key wording, it's a very good report. And by the way, I'd like to thank all of the officers that have been involved in this for their work, because I must say I've been really impressed with the way they've tackled this, and it is an excellent document. I'm really, really proud of it. So thank you, a big thank you to the officers. They've done a sterling job. But some of the on page 61 under the summary of recommendations, interestingly, there's a few words that kind of sum this up. It says the purpose of the SPD is to provide guidance for new development with the suburban areas of Harrow to ensure that the prevailing development is respected and that proposals do no harm. They're meant to say no harm. This through excessive through excessive height and poor design. And I think that's the crux of the matter here. We're not prescribing. This is very different to, and shouldn't be conflated with the, although it's an excellent policy in of itself, policy D9 of the London Plan 2021. This is our document. And what it does is in the suburban areas, and for the reasons I said before, Leader, we can't do this in the opportunity area because it would be contradicting that which has already been adopted and therefore wouldn't be supplementing it. But because there's such silence on our suburban areas, I think this will make such a difference to our planners when, you know, a developer comes in and says, well, actually, I'd like to build 12 stories high, as we had with the Stanmore Station TFL, Sadiq Khan's idea of what goes in a suburban area, 12 stories high opposite a conservation area in Stanmore. Luckily for us, although he called it in, his relationship with his partner didn't last, and it's gone a bit quiet at the moment. I don't suppose for a minute it's gone away, but what this would do is very much protect just exactly that sort of the area, just exactly against this kind of excessively tall building in an area that's typically 2-story detached houses, and there is a block of flats which is a little bit too big and we didn't support on the other side of Stanmore Station, but nonetheless there's a big difference between 7 stories and 12. So that's just one example, and of course 265 the Ridgeway, we did very well on that appeal there. That was a very good example again of this will even make it easier for us to, you know, really say, no, I'm terribly sorry. You've got an area of, you know, semi-detached houses, 2-3 stories. You know, there are no flatted developments hardly at all in that area. I'm talking about the Ridgeway and all around there. You know, to have something of that type of design imposed on an area would really change it. So I'm very, very happy with this. Of course, when we get a bit further along, and we're making quite a lot of progress, I'm very pleased to say, on our local plan, of course, this will still be there, but it will be superseded by this administration's vision for Harrow, which is very different to our predecessors. I mean, we can't, unfortunately, put the clock back in the opportunity area, which is covered in tower blocks. There's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is. And we have to just accept that the character, you know, the views and everything has changed. But for our suburban areas, vast swathes of the borough, most of the borough actually is suburbia. I think that this document will make a tremendous difference to the chances that we'll have of resisting inappropriate development. It's very clear what it's designed to do. It's very well written. And, you know, what it will do is inform potential applicants that which we will accept and won't accept. You know, and as I say, they can put in an application to just about do anything. You could put in an application to put a spaceship in your neighbour's garden, even if you don't own the site. You can apply for anything, even a spaceship, of course. But the point is that with this, if somebody turns up in the suburban area of, you know, 2-story semi-detached houses and wants to put a 7-story, 8 stories or whatever high block of flats in the road, this is where this supplementary planning document will help, because it will be contextually out of keeping with the prevailing developments, the typography of the developments in the area. So without further ado, you know, I commend this to Cabinet. I think it's a really great achievement. I look forward to seeing our master plan, our supplementary planning document for the opportunity area, for that to come forward as well. And as I say, Leader, we're progressing nicely with our local plan, which we need to do as soon as we possibly can, because the policies we've got at the moment don't help us very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious that this has been discussed at considerable length a number of times at the Planning Policy Advisory Panel, and therefore I don't want to have a huge discussion on it, but maybe we'll have no discussion at all. So Councillor Perry seems fine, so we can then agree the recommendation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stevenson, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, yes, Leader, I don't want to prolong the discussion on this other than to say that, you know, I think it's a great paper, and it's great to see Marilyn enthusiastically presenting it, because this was one of the key things that has made us very, very popular in the borough. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that does strike me when you look out at the borough from the higher floors in this
Yeah,
building
it's very stressful.
is how both flat most of it is in terms of development, but how the opportunity area has a huge number of very tall buildings and how out of character those are to the rest of the borough. I think it's vital that we do everything we can to protect the bits of the borough that are still suburban and are still family homes and not flats. And I think this is a big step along the road to doing this until we get our local plan in place, which can have stronger provisions and more robust provisions in them for that. So can we then agree the 5 recommendations set out in page 102?
Agreed.
I'm very pleased to say that's another one of our manifesto commitments that we have delivered on. So I'm very pleased for that. Okay.
I'm so excited.
We now move on to another planning document, the updated
Takes an awful lot, does it?
the updated statement of community involvement. Councillor Marilyn Ashton.
This is I won't talk about this for too long. This is really something that we should have done, frankly, a while ago. We are going to be consulting during the summer period, but we had hoped that we wouldn't have to do it because it's more or less the same as its predecessor. In fact, it's even better than its predecessor. But the one thing that we, in spite of the fact that Councillor Parry doesn't think we listen to a word anyone says, that's absolutely not true. We really do. At the Planning Policy Advisory Panel, it was hard to understand. I think it was hard to understand what Councillor Henson was saying, but I think we actually, in the end, managed to work it out. And he was actually right about something, and that was that it might be an idea to consult more councillors on the slightly smaller size developments of 10 stories and above, you see. And so we've amended this document to reflect some of the really not very helpful mostly, but really useful point that he raised on this. So we do, funnily enough, take quite a lot of note of what is said. And actually, what's nice about the Planning Policy Advisory Panel, of course, is that unlike its predecessor, which was in private and nobody could watch it, for those people who really enjoy watching paint dry, it's really quite an interesting meeting to observe. Unlike tonight's meeting, it is live streamed, and it does give people actually an insight, in my view, very important insight into what we're doing. But as regards this, we have made that. I don't know if you noticed it, Councillor Perry. We have made that adjustment. But otherwise, the document, I commend the document. It's well written, and we're going to be consulting during the summer. But what I'm pleased about is that won't slow us down, because we don't want to take too long to get this adopted, because it should have really been done quite some time ago. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Again, this was discussed at the Planning Policy Advisory Committee, but does anyone have any questions or comments? Councillor Perry.
I don't necessarily have a question, it's more of a comment, and I just wanted to put on record yet again. And it was good to see Councillor Ashton introduce this report in the way she did, and being transparent and being humble in what we already highlighted at the committee. And we was in very Councillor Ashton way robustly challenged, and we was happy. Well, we was happy to support the recommendation, as long as Casey, the legal advice, come back the right way. And so it's right to have that discussion in that forum. And although it went back and forth with regards to the ward councillor debate with Councillor Henson, that's what these policy panels are for. And so we are where we are. And so we do agree on some things, and was happy to have been of assistance on that point anyway.
Yes, you were. And I don't know if that was quite humble exactly, but it's a statement of fact, and we've listened to what you said. Thank you.
That rare moment of bipartisanship. Can we agree the recommendations on page 272? There's 3 recommendations. Are those agreed? Okay, we now move on to the review and adoption of the corporate property strategy, which is Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so I'm pleased to bring this report to Cabinet, and congratulations to all the officers involved in the work that's been put into this over the months. The council, as we know, does have a property portfolio, but what we've put together here is a strategy which will very, very effectively manage it. So an effective asset management strategy, known here as the corporate property strategy, and it's an integral part of the mechanism to ensure we can deliver the corporate aims and objectives of the borough through the property portfolio. So enabling it to proactively support the council's key priorities. Now, the CPS will enable the council to develop action plans, agree priorities, and make decisions to meet longer term objectives. And this all fits into our MTFS clearly. So the strategy covers a range of requirements that the council should enact. So we've got to be a responsible property owner, including sustainability, repair, compliance, and the leasing of the estate, and adopting the corporate management to improve governance. The actual document itself has part one talks about a strategic context about the 212 properties that the council has within the borough. And then part two looks at potential shaping for the future. Part three is about delivery, how this will be measured, because we do need, and this will collate accurate data to enable effective decisions to be made longer term. And you'll see on the last page of the actual document itself, the work stream timetable, which shows the plans over the next few years. I think that's all I really need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this? John.
Thank you, Leader. Just wanted to say that this does seem like an excellent piece of work, and does provide a very firm base going forward in terms of the management of the council's assets. We've welcomed the involvement so far, and particularly the work that Sophie Linton's taken the leadership on. She's certainly involved the sector thus far in feeding into the strategy, and it's certainly an area of priority for the voluntary sector in terms of working with the council on the use of assets and how we can jointly make better use or added value to what already exists. So just to say, welcome this report, and welcome going forward, working with the council on how it's implemented.
Very much. Councillor David Ashton.
Thank you, Leader. I also have been through this report thoroughly with Councillor Stevenson. It's a good report, but it's worth pointing out there are certain elements within it which are not specifically costed within the MTFS. So some of the later work will have to be separately provided for in terms of funding, but the concepts are clearly very sound, but we should be slightly careful in terms of not committing ourselves to things that we haven't budgeted for. Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Yes, thank you. Only a couple of questions if I can. The first one's with regards to the strategic action on page 31 of the strategy, the disposal programme. From memory on the report, I think most of that work's going to be done in 2024, back end of this year into all of 2024. I was just going to ask, with regard to the disposal programme, what the main considerations are going to be by way of disposal. What will the council be looking at? Is it value driven? Is it area driven? I have no idea, so I wouldn't mind some more information, please, councillor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. I mean, the key is that first of all, we must look at these properties as to whether the council can actually make better use of them themselves. So whether it can be whether we need to actually refurbish a building or actually reshape it to make it more usable. All of this has to be looked at in great detail. And if the ultimate decision is that it just isn't an asset that is of use to the council, and that we aren't going to be able to actually sort of change it to make it more usable, then decision will be made if marketing, if we're going to sell it. we must get, it's going to be marketed independently, and we must get fair price if we're going to sell an asset. But I think fundamentally, it's just got to fit into what we have, and can we use the building? Because once we've sold it, we don't have it. So there's no one ever going to rush into those sorts of decisions, but those are the key elements to be considered.
Just to follow up, and I know in previous cabinets we've talked about, I think it was the last cabinet actually, we talked about within the housing team, the social housing decarbonisation fund. Now, I know within the strategy on page 363, I noticed you've got climate change sustainability. Have we made any bids to the public sector decarbonisation scheme? Because obviously that's something which would be accessible. And if we have, what have we bid for?
Well, there's a lot of work being done on sustainability and reducing the carbon footprint within the council. I can't answer that exact point unless there's someone else on the call from the property section who could answer it. But we can come back to you on that. But it's a key consideration, of course it is.
Okay, and finally,
just before.
Oh, sorry, Lee.
Yep. Councillor David Ashton just wants to come in on that.
Add to the debate, really critical area. We have done, in fact, discussing this afternoon with Councillor Palmer as well, in terms of the offices of decarbonisation programme. Quite substantial work coming up with some very, very useful funding helping us. Critical.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of the housing. I was going to ask on the public sector decarbonisation. The last questions from page 356, and again, this is just bullet points, so if you could expand, Councillor Stevenson, is on the investment strategy. Clearly, we've already got an investment portfolio. I just wondered what your ambitions were in this regard, and what does the future short-term, medium-term look like? Any acquisitions, for example?
Right, well, first of all, we are an ambitious council, but we are conservative with a small c, and certainly don't want to be taking big risks. There aren't any major plans actually in relation to investment. I think it's quite interesting for us to actually look outside our borough and see what's happening elsewhere. And I think there's some lessons to be learned about what the council should actually be investing in. So, again, everything's on the table, but no major investment plans to risk or increase borrowing for the council. That's not an aim.
I mean, just to add, one of the things that the councils that have failed and issued a Section 114 notice tend to have in common is that they've been playing the property market and trying to become property developers and property owners and use that as an income source, but often they don't quite understand what they're doing because it's not their professional background, or the officers involved haven't had that and don't bring in that experience. But so I think you have to be wary when you do this. It's not a core function of the council. And whilst we do own some properties that were purchased by previous administration, I don't think there's any major plans to expand that. If there were, they would come to cabinet anyway. Is there any other questions or comments? So, Jean.
If I may just reflect on what John has said, John Higgins, because I think this is a prime example where a way of approaching a task, a project, or whatever, working with VCS and specifically around the skill set that Sophie Linton has, that this has really shown us a way of collaboration which is essentially win-win. And I really need to, she's not here, but I need to congratulate her on having carried out that piece of work. And as sort of the community partnership, etc., we're pleased with that, the way that collaboration is shaping up. So I wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dipti, you wanted to comment?
Just coming into what you said in terms of funding for decarbonisation, we have had a programme of quite a bit of funding additional to the housing that we've done at the Harrow Arts Centre, a number of our schools, a number of other locations, and we'll continue to seek further funding for decarbonising the buildings, so air source heat pumps solar panels. We've done a lot of work already, and we'll continue with that work as well. So any grant that's available, we will look at it and prioritise that in terms of the building stock that we have and where we're going to continue to retain those building, particularly a lot of our schools. We will continue to explore and invest in that to ensure that they are carbon neutral as much as we can do.
I think our managing director also wants to say something.
Yes, thank you, Leader. It's just to say, I don't think we should underestimate the importance of this report and this strategy. We haven't had one of these for a very long time. And ultimately, the buildings that and the estate that a local authority like ourselves has is there to support us delivering the outcomes for residents in the community. So in having the baseline that the team have done, which is an excellent job, so well done Dipti, Sophie and others that have been involved in this, I think this gives us a really, really strong platform moving forwards, not just in terms of the value that an asset has and therefore whether or not actually it's better for us to sell it, but also the community value that we can get from it in delivering the outcomes that we need to do for residents. So I think this is an excellent piece of work, gives us a really, really firm foundation, and look forward to the next steps.
Thank you. If I could put that in a slightly different way, it's one of the many things that we inherited a lack of in the council, and one of the building blocks that we're putting in place. I know that it's not quite what Alex wanted to say, but very clear that's not what he would have said, but it's what I will say as a result. Okay, so we have 2 recommendations on page 332. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. We now move on to the disposal of 2 freehold council interests. And again, I think that's Councillor Stevenson. So.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, so it's a nice coincidence following the questions that we had. This is about disposal. This is actually a relatively simple, straightforward exercise. It's 2 freehold council interests, 2 houses actually, which are owned by the council, and a decision is made. The recommendation is that we do sell them. They're both currently vacant, and they will continue to deteriorate, and the council is incurring holding costs. So the first one is 105 Eastcourt Lane, and this is a former 3-bedroom adult social care house, and it's been vacant for at least 2 years and requires complete modernisation. And the second one is in Stanmore. It's number 2 Hermitage Cottages. Again, it's an attractive 2-bedroom semi-detached style cottage, but it again has been vacant for over 2 years, well, for several years actually, and it also requires complete modernisation. Hasn't even got central heating in it. So I mean, basically, we could actually invest money and actually refurbish them, but our recommendation tonight is to sell these properties on the open market through private treaty or auction. This will actually provide funding for the medium-term financial strategy. We've given great consideration. Could these properties be used for housing, etc.? And location isn't good, but the fact that it's going to be a huge capital cost to actually bring them up to spec, our recommendation is therefore to sell these 2 properties. And this won't make a huge sort of dent on the sort of any, it won't bring in a huge amount of capital for the council, and it won't actually affect our property portfolio significantly. So the recommendation is to sell both. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Can I ask that confidential Appendix A is noted? If anyone does have any questions on that, we'll obviously have to go into private session. Any questions on this report? Nope. So we have 3 recommendations on page 374. Are those agreed?
Great.
Okay, we now come to item 16, the electoral print contract. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Leader. Highlight of the evening. This should be quite straightforward. It is the renewal of our printing contract for electoral materials. It is a very electoral printing is very highly specialised. There's only a handful of companies that actually do it. We have very high quality control standards, and what we're being asked to agree tonight is a new 3-year contract with a framework agreement that we're doing jointly with the London Borough of Barnet. I just wanted to take a moment just to thank the officers that have drawn this up, particularly Aaron and Vishal. So many thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this report? Can I also ask that confidential appendixes 1 to 6B are noted here? Otherwise, we'll need to move into private session. Can we then agree the recommendations set out on page 382? And there were 4 of them. Agreed? Okay, we now move on to the revenue and capital budget outturn. And before I ask Councillor David Ashton to introduce it, can I also welcome Sharon here, who's now about to become, or has become today, our Section 151 officer in the interim. Councillor David Ashton.
Welcome. This is a historic report which sets out the final outturn for both the revenue and also the capital budgets for 22-23. And the recommendations are there for noting on the outturn position, and also for Cabinet to approve certain capital additions and amendments, one of which is in Appendix 5, which is exempt. Shouldn't be a problem. The final outturn of the revenue budget is an overspend of 5.8 million, or 5.842 to be precise, which has been funded from a budget planning reserve. Now, this is very important because the original 22-23 budget was set out on the basis of drawing down £14.7 million from reserves. So this was reduced to 5.8, which means that 8.8 of reserves were not drawn down and can be used. And this is a reflection of the efforts made over the past year to control in an effective and positive way costs to ensure that our reserves are protected. If we'd gone ahead and permitted, if I may use that word, the 14.7 reserve utilisation to take place, it would have left us with even further reduced reserves than we already have, and they're already low enough, quite frankly. There was a significant variance on the capital programme, with only 25% and 28% of spent against budget for the general fund and the HRA. This is becoming a bit of a problem, and it's becoming a tendency for lots of capital slippage, and this will need to be reviewed to ensure we have sensible capital programmes. There was also an underspend overall on the capital programme of 1.7 million, but this did result in some savings in terms of capital financing costs. The main area of overspend in the directorates was in the Police Directorate of 3.9 million, offset by underspends in Chief Exec. And corporately, there was an overspend as a result of the 2022-3 pay award, which was much higher than anticipated. This is obviously a problem affecting lots of councils. The pay award cost us £6.9 million against a budget of 2 million, because when the budget was first done, that 2 million was regarded as being a sensible figure. You could debate that, but it was probably fairly realistic at the time. Having said that, there was some underspend against non-pay inflation that contributed towards the overspend, and that helps. So the council reserves, importantly, if you want to look at some stage, table 10, and they show total reserves of 71.7 million, which on the face of it looks pretty good. But of these reserves, the great majority are earmarked. In other words, they are put aside for a particular use and are not available for general utilisation if we start running short on our budget. So the total earmarked reserves are 46 million. There are non-earmarked reserves of 18.3. In other words, 18.3 is the actual figure which we've now analysed in some detail, which is available to offset any deficit we have on our current P&L, if you like, our income. Behind that, there's an overall fund balance, what's called general fund, of 10 million, but that's a figure which is effectively non-touchable. So our reserves, effectively, for these purposes, are 18.3 million. Sounds a big figure, but it's not in the context. When you think about last year's budget, was anticipating overrunning by 14, which is a good 70 or 80% of the reserves available, and we cannot afford to do that. So we are walking quite a difficult tightrope in terms of ensuring that our costs are controlled, and we cannot afford to overspend for the current year. So there's a lot of work going into the current outturn on the NTFS, and obviously for the subsequent years, which will work over the coming year. And Sharon and I and all the financial team have that high on our agenda. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Leader. And also, can I welcome Sharon into post? Congratulations on your appointment to date. Just to follow up, if I can, and just to caveat, I've only got a couple of points. Is obviously over the last year plus, there's been administration priorities which has impacted on the budget you inherited. So I often it gets thrown in this forum that we inherited a budget. But if I was a resident and I was looking at some of the things here, and this is questions to Councillor Ashton, within some of the things I've heard over the last year, and the particular areas around place, and it's around some of the service areas with regards to staffing. Now, over 12 months, we've had issues mentioned back then, and we've still got issues now with regards to refuge, parks maintenance. We've heard then around fly tipping issues. We've still got them now. So if I was a resident looking at nearly a £650,000 underspend on staffing, that might concern me, thinking there's plenty of areas that money could have been spent on. So what will you do, given your financial oversight, to ensure some of your key priority areas you claim to talk about were you actually spending on and not holding vacant posts?
So you can use the mic.
Keep forgetting, I'm sorry. We have no intention of holding open vacant posts which would provide critical services to residents. At the same time, we have to look at every cost caption in the council, because repeating back that we would, well, I'd like to think I wouldn't ever anticipate a budget which looked to utilise £14 million of reserves. Just wouldn't do it. It's inappropriate. It's not good budgeting. And you can only achieve a better position by virtue of controlling all your costs. Having said that, we don't want to avoid costs, so we don't want to save on costs which would be adversely affecting the front line. But sometimes you can be too harsh on the back office, and it's too easy, quite frankly, not necessarily for the council, but generally speaking, to say we want all our money to go into frontline services and we'll really economise on the back office. The back office is what makes the front office work. And if you don't have the two in balance, you're going to have a poorly run company and, frankly, a poorly run council. So you can't answer any specific point. You have to look at the overall balance. But I would say very strongly that from my point of view, from the finance portfolio, and I know from all of the other portfolio holders, they all have in mind the optimisation of the service we can provide within the constraints that we face.
Just to follow up, and that was, I hear the response, and that was his response I was expecting around looking at everything in the round, but you've still got a budget line in order to invest on a particular service. It was underspending. Just moving on, then again, just
sorry, you haven't really. See, if you take an overall view, which you have to do, and then you say, oh look, we got a saving, we're down on costs by £100,000, I will spend that. Life doesn't work that way. You have to look at the overall figure. Otherwise, you'll find you spend all the goodies, and all you've got left is the bad stuff, and you can't afford it.
No, all I'm saying is the issues which were reported in this forum 12 months ago, they're still there, and we've still underspent in some of those public realm areas. That's all I'm trying to add. If I was a resident, and I am a resident, the other area which is a concern, which I would expect of having financial oversight, we would want to ensure we spend on, is there's a huge underspend in mental health services to under 65s. Now, I know I'm picking some of these in isolation, but there's still frontline services, putting residents first. You've got a budget line and spend it. Better Care Fund, 605. So all I'm saying is, if I was a resident, there's some areas which I would thought you would claim are priority, but they're not, because you're seeking to make savings from those areas and not fully utilise the budget in what are some frontline services in place, and also with regards to vulnerable people in Harrow, such as mental health sufferers.
Well, seeking to make efficiency savings, and there's nothing wrong with efficiency saving in a really critical area, providing you still maintain the service. I mean, it's rather difficult having a discussion on line by line in this sort of forum. I'm happy to sit down with you separately, and if you have some thoughts on particular captions, we can discuss it. We're pleased to do so.
I mean, the thing I would add to it, though, is there was a projected use of reserves of 14.7 million. There was also £6 million of inflationary costs, which would have meant we were spending £20 million more than we were bringing in had we put forward this and not made these changes and savings. You clearly have to underspend in some areas, and almost everything the council does is critical to some people. There's very few services we now provide that aren't critical in some way or important in some way or have some relevance for our residents in some way. And so you have to make these difficult balances between overspends and underspends. There's also sometimes all sorts of reasons why things underspend. When you set the budget in February, the financial year doesn't start until April, changes happen, demand that you anticipated doesn't materialize. There are lots and lots of different reasons why you might get over and underspends, which is why the report goes into some detail in all of them. But if you do have any particular questions, I'm sure if David's happy to go through it, or Sharon's happy to go through it with you, or the corporate directors will be in their area. So we now have some recommendations just set out on page 392. There's 3 recommendations. Are those agreed? Okay, and the next item, which is much like the electoral print contract, something we've all been waiting for, the Treasury Management Annual Outturn Report.
I don't know whether any of you remember the comedian Charlie Drake, who had a role in an orchestra. He had triangle, and he was counting right to the end, and the orchestra stopped. He was left with swing over his shoulders. Anyway, only some of you remember that. Some remember Charlie Drake. What else? Okay. This is the Treasury Management Annual Outturn Report. It's an important document, although it's not the most exciting. It's year-end report reviewing activity in Treasury Management 22-23. In a nutshell, Treasury Management comprises managing all the council's borrowing at the optimal cost to support the capital programme, and then importantly, investing surplus cash balances to generate additional returns to support the budget. That, in fact, has become increasingly important because interest rates have improved recently, and that improvement, from the point of view of income, and interest rates to the council have been relatively positive. Activity as a whole has been quite positive last year. The council's continued with its internal borrowing policy that avoids us going out to the market, and effectively means that cash in the bank is being used to fund the capital programme as opposed to borrowing, and that minimises financial costs. The council's reduced by 6.3 million the borrowings because of repaying a loan in the year. So that investment income gave a contribution of 600,000 plus to the MTFS in terms of improved interest rates. The Treasury management activity has remained within various operational boundaries. We have various technical requirements, and we complied with the relevant rules and regulations. So although it is a dry topic, nevertheless, for an entity and I would say a company, an entity the size of Harrow Council, there's a lot of money flying around that has to be very carefully controlled, and we are so doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, whilst I joked at the beginning, it is, again, reading the 114 notice and the reports that follow them, getting the Treasury management wrong is at the heart of everything that's gone wrong in councils across the country where it's failed. It's, for whatever reason, they've had massive unsustainable borrowing, and that's their Treasury management strategy among many other things. But that's where, it really does matter, and it is an important document. And if you don't get it right, it can be quite catastrophic for councils. Is there any questions on this report? Funnily enough, no. So we have to note this report. So can we note it?
Noted.
Okay, and I don't think there's any other business other than to say goodbye to someone. Nicoletta is it's her last meeting. She's moving on to other things still in London, but she's been clerking these meetings for my entire time, I think, on cabinet, and I know probably before then as well. So thank you very much. It's always good. My papers are always well in order, and I know what's going on, which is very important when you're chairman. I'm very grateful to have a good person in democratic services clerking your meetings. Is very important as a chairman to keep the meetings running. So thank you very much, and the best of luck in your future. There is no part 2 business, so I declare the meeting closed.